Storytelling has come a long way since its inception, moving from spoken word to printed volume to moving pictures, and finally to the interactive medium we know as video games. Each form has its pros and cons, and while each progressive form of storytelling outshines its predecessor, it always relinquishes something to be better at something else. For instance, movies gave up an extreme amount of linear detail that books had in order to deliver a real-time visual minute-to-minute experience. In games, though, storytelling is much more difficult, because timed, linear delivery is sacrificed for interaction. And it's the lack of utilizing player interaction that often hinders the delivery of a game's story. Books rely on words, and movies rely on video. Therefore, they tell and show their stories respectively. However, games are about doing, so stories should be presented during and through interaction. This is known as do, don't show or tell, but many games don't follow this rule. However, there are multiple titles that can be used to make example of how following this maxim is for the best, and one of the better games to start with is Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 exemplifies not only how a good game should play, but also how a good game should present its story. With the exception of its short beginning and conclusion, Half-Life 2 never takes control out of the player's hands. In every instance where the story is the focus of the moment, you're still allowed to move around and do as you please. By allowing this, Half-Life 2 never removes you from the role of player, and remains an interactive experience from start to finish. This is how storytelling in games is at its best, when complete control is left in the player's hands and never wrestled away for anything like a cutscene. Of course, while Half-Life 2 is AAA across the board, it doesn't explore all of the good interactive storytelling techniques that exist. Another game that exemplifies interactive storytelling is BioShock. Just like Half-Life 2, BioShock never takes control out of the player's hands, with the only exception being the small introduction and conclusion to the game. Instead of stopping to display something like cutscenes, the player stumbles across countless audio diaries, or receives radio transmissions. Granted, these snippets of dialogue do conform to the rule of being told things, but because they are delivered at the same time as gameplay, they function through an acceptable and, moreover, effective loophole. This style of presentation works very well because interaction doesn't have to stop in order to push the story forward. However, there are some technical problems with this style of presentation. The most glaring issue is how audio transmissions conflict with real-time sound effects. This is a problem that isn't easily solved in a first-person shooter, as fading out environment sound for the sake of spoken dialogue can make being snuck up on a problem. However, it is a better alternative than being forced to stop playing and find a safe place to stand while listening to the recording. Furthermore, having to go into a menu and find and play audio logs is also an enormously bad idea, because it breaks minute-to-minute gameplay. Doom 3, which used audio recordings first, made this exact mistake. As a result, the personnel logs you picked up in Mars City were much more cumbersome and less effective at telling backstory than the audio logs were in BioShock. The point is, being told backstory in a game isn't bad, so long as you don't have to stop playing in order to listen to it, or worse yet, read it. But I digress. Point being, the audio log system is effective, but it can be taken even a step further. Though an unusual method of story delivery, and more often seen in television and film, narration can also be a surprisingly effective form of storytelling in games. Bastion is a good example of how narration can enrich a game's experience and also deliver a copious amount of information to the player in an entertaining manner. However, this is a very dangerous way to deliver a story, because of how easily it can be executed wrong. It's important that whenever a story is delivered through narration, it isn't just monologuing what is already happening on screen. This is part of the do, don't show, or tell rule. Bastion does make this mistake to a certain extent. However, it does it in such minor volume, and even then in such an entertaining manner, that it doesn't detract from the presentation much, if at all. Most of the information relayed through the narration is actually about what you're getting into, or giving you a heads up on your enemies or surroundings. This is how narration can be properly used to enrich a game's experience, by commentating on the situation in an informative manner, rather than just saying what's going on. Not many games use active narration though, as it is a unique form of storytelling. However, as shown by Bastion, when used right, narration can make a game phenomenally better than without. Storytelling is a long-standing form of entertainment, and it's only through the long and painful process of trial and error that the most effective methods of presentation are ever fleshed out. Just keep in mind that a poorly written story and a poorly presented story are two different things, even though they are related. And that while a good story can be killed by poor presentation, no amount of good presentation can save a poorly written story. This is a subject that has room for more discussion though, so if you formulated an opinion that can further the matter, then go ahead and hit the comments. Until next time, this has been a video blog by William Strife for B10g.net, August 22nd, 2011. Strife out.